Before we begin this heartwarming story, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if you love stories that touch the soul, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family. The rain didn't just fall, it screamed. Thunder rolled through the sky like an angry drum. Cars rushed past, splashing icy water onto the sidewalks. The whole city seemed to be crying. Inside a sleek black Rolls-Royce, Joseph Lee sat behind the wheel, watching the storm. The wipers moved back and forth, but they couldn't clear the fog in his heart. He had just closed a billion-dollar deal. People would call him a genius again. But he felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. What was the point of money when silence filled your mansion like ghosts? What was the point of success when you woke up every morning feeling hollow? His phone buzzed with messages from women who didn't know him. Only his wallet. He turned it face down. He didn't want fake tonight. Then through the blur of rain and loneliness, he saw her, a girl, standing at a cold, lonely bus stop. No umbrella, no jacket, just a thin pink hoodie soaked all the way through. She was hugging herself so tightly it looked like she was trying to hold her soul together. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks. Her sneakers were soaked in muddy water. And yet, she stood tall, head slightly bowed, but not broken, like a flower fighting to bloom in a storm. Joseph's heart did something strange. It skipped. He slowed down, something in him pulling toward her like gravity. He rolled the window down, letting in a sharp gust of rain. "Hey," he said, his voice deeper than usual. "Do you need a ride?" She didn't even flinch at first. Then she looked up, and he saw her face. She was young, maybe 20th, pale from the cold, lips trembling. But her eyes, God, her eyes. They were the kind that had seen too much pain, but refused to stop shining. Eyes full of quiet fire, the kind that didn't beg, it dared. "No," she whispered. Her voice was soft but not weak. "I don't take rides from strangers." Joseph smiled, for the first time in weeks, maybe months. "I'm Joseph," he said gently, brushing wet hair from his forehead. "Now I'm not a stranger." She hesitated. The wind howled around them like a warning. She could have said no again, but something in his voice made her pause. She shivered. Her fingers turned blue. Still, she kept her back straight. "I'm just going to the nearest shelter," she murmured. "But they're full tonight." Joseph looked at her hands, tightly clenched, at her shoes, splitting at the soles, at her face, too young for so much sorrow. He looked at the rain, then at her, and something inside him cracked. He reached across and opened the passenger door. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and calm. "I'll get you somewhere warm, a hotel, safe. I promise." She stared at him, uncertain. He could see the war behind her eyes. She'd clearly trusted the wrong people before. But he didn't rush her. He didn't beg. He just waited, still, patient, like a man who knew this moment could change everything. "I don't have money," she said finally. I'm not one of those girls looking for a sugar daddy." Joseph's heart stung. "I don't want anything from you," he replied softly. "Just don't stand in the rain anymore." She looked into his eyes, really looked, and slowly, she stepped into his car. She smelled like wet earth and quiet fear. But beneath that, something pure. He turned up the heat, handed her a cloth napkin from the console. She wiped her hands, still shivering. "I'm Alice," she said after a moment. "Alice Smith." Joseph's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. It was a simple name, but it echoed in his heart like thunder. And just like that, under the city's cold storm, something impossible happened. A billionaire met a runaway girl soaked in rain, and fate whispered, "It begins." The city never truly sleeps, but that night, the rain silenced even the noise of dreams. Joseph didn't take her to his mansion, not the penthouse with glass walls and champagne chills, not the place filled with gold and cold marble, because something told him she didn't need luxury, she needed safety. Instead, he pulled into a quiet corner of the city, a small hotel with flickering lights and the smell of coffee and linen. It was humble, clean, warm, the kind of place where the world slowed down. He walked in with her beside him, the receptionist barely glancing up. Joseph booked 2 separate rooms, handing over his black card without a word. No fanfare, no questions, just 2 keys, and a glance at the trembling girl behind him. They took the elevator in silence. The lights flickered once. The old machine creaked, but neither said a word. When they reached the hallway, Joseph handed Alice one of the keys. "Room 507, he said softly. She nodded, her hoodie still dripping. "Thanks," she whispered, barely meeting his eyes. Joseph opened his door across from hers, room 508, and stepped in. The room was small but neat. A queen bed, a couch by the window, and a heater humming low. He left the door unlocked, just in case. He sat down, ran a hand through his damp hair, and let out a long breath. But before he could close his eyes, he heard it. A knock. Software hesitant, like a secret trying not to be heard. He stood, heart tightening, and opened the door. Alice stood there, her eyes wide and haunted. Can I stay here?" she asked, her voice barely a breath in the dark. Joseph froze, not because he misunderstood, but because he understood all too well. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of being alone. Without a word, he stepped aside. She entered quietly, looking down at the floor, then the walls, then the couch. "I'll take the couch," he said quickly, as if reading her fear. "You can have the bed. I won't—" "I know," she cut in gently. He handed her a warm blanket from the closet, folded, clean, smelling of fresh soap, like safety wrapped in cotton. She sat on the edge of the bed, the blanket around her shoulders. Joseph took the couch, stretched out quietly, and watched the shadows on the ceiling. For a long time, the room was silent, except for the rain tapping at the windows like it was trying to get in. Then her voice broke the stillness. "I ran away," she said, just 3 words, but they cracked the air like thunder. Joseph didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "My stepfather tried to hurt me," she whispered, staring at her hands. Her voice trembled, but not from cold. Pain lived in every syllable. "My mom didn't believe me," she swallowed. "She called me a liar, said I was trying to ruin her marriage." Joseph's fists clenched, not out of anger toward her, but toward a world that let this happen to someone like her. "I packed my bag and left," Alice continued. "That was 2 days ago. I've been sleeping in stairwells, train stations, bus stops." Her eyes glistened. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." Joseph sat up, his voice low, firm. "You shouldn't have had to run," he said. She glanced at him, startled. "You believe me?" He met her eyes. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Truth shows in the eyes, and you are screaming." She blinked, like no one had ever said that to her before. Then, with a quiet voice that carried the weight of her entire life, she asked, "Why are you being kind to me?" Joseph hesitated, because he didn't know how to explain it. This wasn't about guilt, or charity, or even attraction. This was something deeper, something he'd never felt before. He looked at her, really looked, and finally whispered, "Because I see you." That silenced her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd cried too many times before. Joseph pulled out his wallet and handed her a folded bill. She shook her head. "I'm not asking for money." "It's not charity," he said softly. "It's just food. Please." She took it, slowly, then said something that shattered the air between them. "You're the first man who didn't look at me like I was broken." Joseph's throat tightened, and in that small, quiet room, with rain still falling outside, 2 strangers sat side by side, and something invisible began to form. Not love, not yet, but trust. And that was the beginning of everything. Morning crept in slowly, painting the hotel room with soft gray light. The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked like it was mourning something. Alice woke to the scent of warm toast, eggs, and fresh fruit. Joseph had ordered room service. He sat quietly at the small table near the window, reading something on his phone. But when he saw her sit up, he smiled, genuine, tired, and soft. Breakfast here, he said, standing. You should eat. She hesitated, then nodded. Every part of her still braced for betrayal. But there was something about Joseph Lee that didn't feel like the rest of the world. She sat down, eyes wide at the spread in front of her. Orange juice, pancakes, even a small bowl of berries. For a girl who'd gone to sleep hungry on a wet couch 2 nights ago, it felt unreal. As she took the first bite, Joseph leaned forward. Do you have a phone? He asked gently. Alice shook her head, her fingers tightening on the fork. I sold it. I needed bus money. He stood without a word, grabbed his coat, and left the room. 10 minutes later, he was back, with a small white box, an iPhone, brand new. He placed it on the table beside her plate, like it was just a napkin. Alice stared at it, stunned. What? What are you doing? I'm getting you back on your feet, Joseph replied calmly. She pushed the box back toward him. Number, I can't take that. I can't owe you. You won't owe me anything, he said, voice steady. This isn't charity. This is help. No strings. Her lips trembled. She looked at him like she didn't know whether to scream or cry. Maybe both. Why are you doing this? She asked, eyes fierce and afraid. Because you need it, he said simply. She stared at him, really stared, like she was trying to peel away the suit, the money, the perfect smile, and find the man beneath it. That day, for the first time, she opened up more. They took a walk through the city park behind the hotel. The ground was still wet, and her shoes soaked fast, but she didn't complain. With every step, the walls around her cracked just a little more. I used to be a good student, she said, voice soft. I wanted to be a writer. Joseph looked at her. What happened? Racism happened, she replied, eyes on the gravel path. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, like he always did. I lived in a small town, she continued. My mom's white, but I'm not fully. My skin was always enough to make people whisper. Look twice. Treat me different. Joseph's jaw clenched. I had a teacher once, she said bitterly. He read one of my essays and said, girls like you don't get far. You should focus on practical jobs. She laughed, but it was sharp and hollow. After that, I stopped writing. I figured, what's the point? Joseph stopped walking. He turned to her, eyes dark and full of something she didn't understand yet. Girls like you, he said firmly, are exactly what the world needs more of. Alice froze. He didn't say it like a line. He said it like a truth that burned inside him. You don't know me, she whispered. I know enough, he replied. They sat on a bench. Birds chirped in the trees above, but Alice didn't look up. Her fingers played with the hem of her sleeve. Finally, she turned to him, voice low. Why are you really helping me? Joseph paused. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he looked at her, not the way men look at women, but the way the broken look at someone who just might understand. Because I've never felt anything real, until now. Alice blinked. She didn't know what to say, so he spoke again. My life is made of numbers, deals, mergers, expensive wine, and empty parties. He ran a hand down his face. I used to think I had everything, but every woman I met wanted one thing. My wallet, not me, just the headlines. He laughed bitterly. I'm 35, and I don't know what love is. I've never even known what truth feels like. Until, he looked up at her, until I saw you, standing in the rain, refusing a ride from a stranger, too proud to ask for help, but too brave to give up. Alice's chest ached. His words weren't sweet. They were raw, real. You don't even know me, she said again, but her voice cracked. I want to, he whispered. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it away fast. She wasn't used to softness. She wasn't used to anyone looking at her like she mattered. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pen. Say something, he said, handing it to her. What? Write something, anything. Just write. Her hands shook as she took the pen. She looked around, found a napkin in his pocket, and scribbled 2 lines. I stood in the rain, but the storm never broke me. It just showed me who could stand beside me. Joseph read it and smiled. Start again, he said. The world was wrong about you, but I won't be. And in that moment, on a damp park bench in a city that had forgotten her, Alice felt something break open inside her. Hope. The city outside their hotel room whispered with the sound of passing cars, the soft drip of water from the roof, and the distant hum of night. Inside, the silence was sacred. Joseph lay on the couch, but he wasn't asleep. He watched the soft rise and fall of Alice's chest as she curled under the blanket. She had asked timidly if she could sleep beside him, on the couch, not the bed. Not because she feared him, but because something in her heart told her it was safe near his warmth. Neither of them had said much that night. Words felt too small, too fragile for the strange storm they were in. Her fingers brushed his arm lightly once, unintentionally, and in that moment, Joseph felt more than he had in years of boardroom victories. They didn't need to speak. Their hearts were already talking. At exactly 2 a.m., a sound broke that fragile peace. Knock, knock, knock. Joseph sat up instantly. Alice opened her eyes, confused. He moved to the door carefully, barefoot, cautious. "Who is it?" he called. A voice answered, sharp and amused. "Mr. Lee, you've been trending." Joseph's chest tightened. He opened the door only a crack, just enough to see the face of a young man in a leather jacket, holding a camera and smirking like a devil who smelled scandal. The flash went off. "Is it true?" the reporter asked, too loud for comfort. "Are you hiding a runaway in this hotel room?" Joseph's eyes narrowed. "What?" "She's all over social media. Someone saw you two together. Probably hotel staff. A white billionaire with a mystery girl in a hoodie? It's viral gold. You know how people are." Joseph's blood ran cold. The man shoved his phone through the gap in the door, showing the headlines flashing in bold. "Billionaire's dirty secret. Young homeless girl discovered in hotel room. Joseph Lee's angel, or something more scandalous? Love, lust, or lies? The internet demands the truth." Joseph didn't blink. He reached for the phone, threw it to the floor, and slammed the door shut with a bang that echoed. Behind him, Alice stood frozen. Her hands trembled at her sides. She stared at the floor, silent, like the breath had been stolen from her lungs. "I should go," she whispered. Joseph turned. "No." She stepped back, shaking. "I'm ruining your life. I told you this would happen. People like me, we don't belong in your world." Joseph walked toward her, slow but certain. "You don't belong in their world," he said. "But you damn well belong in mine." Her chin trembled. "You don't understand. They'll tear you apart. Your company, your image, everything you've built." "I've built walls," Joseph said, voice low. "Not a life. Don't you see that?" She shook her head. "It's not that simple." And that's when he stepped closer. Closer, until she could feel his breath, warm and steady. He cupped her face gently, as if afraid she'd shatter. And then he whispered 5 words that made the world stand still. "You are my life now." Her eyes widened, lips parting in disbelief. "I mean it," he said. "Let them talk. Let them scream and type and hate. I've lived for headlines. Now I want to live for you." Tears welled in her eyes. "No one's ever chosen me before," she said. "I'm not choosing you," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I'm staying with you. There's a difference." She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. All her life, people had pushed her aside, told her she wasn't enough. Too brown, too poor, too invisible. But this man, this billionaire with more to lose than anyone, he had just made her his everything. Outside, more knocks came. Camera flashes lit up the hallway through the peephole. But inside, there was silence again, the kind that only love could make. Joseph turned off the lights, locked the door, and pulled her gently back to the couch. She rested her head on his shoulder, and this time, her hand found his. He didn't let go. And as the outside world roared with chaos and judgment, inside that room, 2 broken souls finally found peace. Together. Joseph Lee had never been the kind of man who chased the spotlight. He owned it, controlled it, used it to build empires. But this time, it wasn't about business. It was about her. It was about Alice Smith, the girl the world was trying to chew up, spit out, and forget. But he wouldn't let that happen. That morning, Joseph walked into the hotel lobby dressed in black, his face hard as steel. Beside him, Alice walked with quiet strength, wearing a simple blue dress he had bought her the day before. She held her chin up, though her hands trembled at her sides. The media circus had already begun. Dozens of reporters waited outside the glass doors, cameras raised, microphones like weapons. "Joseph, is the girl with you your lover? Did you pay her to stay with you? Is this a publicity stunt? Is she really homeless, or is she a gold digger?" Alice flinched with every word. Joseph did not. He walked to the podium he had ordered set up in front of the hotel entrance. The air buzzed with tension. Cameras rolled. People watching from around the world waited for his reaction. Some to mock him, some to hate him, and a rare few to understand. He adjusted the mic, took a slow breath, and began. "I am Joseph Lee," he said, voice steady as stone. Reporters fell silent. He looked straight into the sea of flashing lights and judgmental eyes. "You all know me as a billionaire, a CEO, a man with everything. But for the first time in my life, I realized I had nothing, until I met her." He turned to Alice. She stood still, her eyes wide, heart pounding. He continued, "You want the truth? I didn't meet her at a gala or a yacht party. I saw her standing in the rain, alone, freezing, while the rest of the world looked away." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She was hungry. She was scared. But when I offered her help, she didn't beg. She didn't even want anything from me. She looked me in the eye and said she didn't take rides from strangers." He paused. A few reporters lowered their mics, struck by his tone. "And that moment," Joseph said softly, "was the first time someone made me feel like a person, not a bank account." He turned back to the cameras, his voice rising with fire. "She is not a scandal. She is not a project. She is not a mistake. She is Alice Smith. She's kind. She's brave. She has seen more cruelty than most of you ever will, and still chooses not to hate." Somewhere, someone gasped. Joseph's jaw tightened. "I didn't fall in love with her because of her past. I fell for her because of her strength." He leaned forward, gaze piercing. "And if that bothers you, if her skin color, her background, or the fact that she once slept at bus stops offends you, then maybe the problem isn't her. It's you." Silence. A silence so thick you could hear hearts breaking and walls crumbling. Alice's lips trembled. She had been judged her whole life. Too poor, too dark, too ghetto, too loud, too quiet. But in this moment, in front of the whole world, a man with everything had just declared her his everything. Her eyes filled with tears. But for the first time, they were tears of pride. She reached for Joseph's hand. He took it without hesitation. The cameras flashed again, but now they saw something different. Not scandal, but love. Real, honest, unfiltered love that dared to rise above society's poison. A reporter finally found her voice. "Mr. Lee, are you saying you're in love with her?" Joseph didn't flinch. He looked at Alice, then back at the crowd. "I'm not saying it," he answered. "I'm living it." And just like that, the story changed. Not because the world suddenly became kind, but because Joseph had dared to speak truth into the noise. For once, the world paused and listened. 1 year later, the world had changed, but not as much as they had. No longer were they headlines. No longer whispers on the internet. Joseph Lee and Alice Smith had written their own ending, far from the noise, far from the past. They stood under an arch of white wildflowers in a quiet garden just outside the city. Birds chirped softly. A gentle breeze moved the petals, and the sky, once the place of thunder and heartbreak, was clear. Alice wore a simple cream dress with no diamonds, no designer labels, just a small gold necklace Joseph had given her the night he first said, "I love you." She held a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, not because they were expensive, but because they always found the light. Joseph stood in front of her, no longer the ice-hearted billionaire with lonely eyes. He looked like a man who had finally been set free. His vows were not scripted, not polished, but real. "I've had everything money could buy," he said, voice trembling, "but nothing that made my heart beat like you do." Alice blinked back tears. He continued, "You taught me that love isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steady. It's holding someone when the world tells you not to. You gave me a home inside your heart when I didn't even know I was homeless. The guests, just a few close friends, a few girls from the shelter Alice once stayed at, and a retired librarian who helped Alice edit her book, watched in silence, many in tears. When Alice spoke, her voice was soft but powerful. I used to think I was invisible," she said, "like I could disappear in a crowd and no one would notice. But you saw me, not as a project, not as a charity case, but as a woman." She smiled through tears. "You didn't save me with your money, you saved me with your heart." And with that, they kissed. There were no drones, no headlines, just the soft clapping of people who believed in something rare. True love that wasn't filtered by status, race, or past. But their story didn't end there. Joseph surprised everyone a month later by selling his empire. He didn't do it for drama. He did it for purpose. He created a foundation called Rainlight, a place where runaway girls, abused teens, and lost souls like Alice could find shelter, safety, and hope. He turned abandoned buildings into warm homes. He turned his money into meaning. And Alice? Alice became a writer. Her first book, The Girl in the Rain, shook the world, not because of who she married, but because of what she survived. In it, she wrote, "I was told I'd never be loved, that girls like me didn't belong, but love found me in the rain, with a man who had everything and gave it all up just to hold my hand." The book didn't just become a bestseller, it became a movement. Schools taught it, shelters passed it around like treasure, and on the final page, Alice left a note to the world. "Judge me by my strength, not my scars. Judge him by his love, not his wealth. And maybe, just maybe, learn to look deeper than skin or silence." That note went viral. People cried reading it. Some changed, not all, but enough. One day a young girl sat at a bus stop in the rain. She was cold, alone, lost. And someone handed her a copy of The Girl in the Rain. That book saved her, because in every page Alice and Joseph had poured what they had found. Not fame, not riches, but something greater. A heart that finally knew love. And through that love, they taught the world one truth. Love doesn't ask where you came from. It just asks if you're ready to stay. Love doesn't care about race, money, or the past. Real love stands in the rain and stays. In a world where judgment comes easy, may we all be a little more like Joseph and see people with our hearts, not our eyes.